Venezuela's main opposition alliance announced on Tuesday it will take part in November's elections, ending a 3-year boycott. This August 31st marked 5 years since Brazil's first female president, Dilma Rousseff, was illegally impeached, and the political crisis in the country continues. Despite the chaotic scenes to the contrary, U.S. President Joe Biden claimed Tuesday that he was ready for every eventuality in the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. And we begin this news brief in Venezuela, where talks between the government and sectors of the opposition have borne fruit, as the main opposition alliance announced on Tuesday it will take part in November's elections, ending a 3-year boycott. The Democratic Unity Roundtable Coalition boycotted the 2018 presidential vote that saw Nicolás Maduro re-elected and the 2020 legislative elections in which it lost control of parliament. In both cases, it dismissed the elections as fraudulent without any evidence and as part of a long-running refusal to recognize the Maduro government. In a statement, the opposition alliance said it will participate in the November 21st elections for mayors and state governors. The announcement comes as opposition sectors and the government continued talks hosted by Mexico and with mediation by Norway in a bid to solve the political crisis that has seen major attempts at destabilization and plots to overthrow the democratically elected government of President Maduro. Maduro welcomed the move.
The political gesture of participating in the elections again is to be applauded. With the weight of the Constitution and justice on the one hand, and with the weight of democracy and inclusive dialogue on the other, we have been building this path.
Argentina's National Electoral Chamber announced that all health protocols are in place for the midterm elections of September 12th and November 14th. We have more details in the following report with our collaborator, Oscar Morquera.
Exclusive interview with TeleSUR, Deputy General Director of Argentina's Electoral Chamber, Dr. Gustavo Mason, explained the health measures put in place for the midterm elections in the South American country, following a protocol specially designed to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. This health protocol involves lining up outside the establishment with social distancing, the use of face masks, and if the health facilitator requires it, we will enter when the facilitator requires it, as well as the sanitation of our hands. There will be a limited capacity, that is to say a certain number of people inside the polling stations. The areas will be constantly sanitized. The voting areas will be ventilated every 2 hours for a period of 10 minutes. Polling stations will be open from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. local time on Sunday, September the 12th, but the National Electoral Chamber will give priority to special cases. However, it is worth mentioning that according to the health protocol, there is a preferential timetable for people at risk. That is to say that between 10:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m., those people at risk will be able to vote. In the case of Buenos Aires City, Dr. Servini extended the schedule to the whole day for people at risk, who will have priority. This time round, there will be 25% more polling stations. The total number of schools prepared as stations nationwide exceeds 17,000, and voters will only be able to take off their masks to prove their identity at the moment of showing up before the electoral authority. Let's remember then the voting process. Once we enter, we have to show the document, we put it on the table, we take the ballot, we go to the voting booth. In the voting booth, we will put the ballot in that envelope, and in the booth, we will cast the ballot. Just fold it, without using saliva on it. Then, we put it on the ballot box. We will sign the stub with our pen, and in case we do not carry one, we will be given one. The National Electoral Chamber suggests entering the polling stations without accompanying children in order to respect the distancing protocols. Dr. Mason gave details of the work carried out by the justice system of the South American country to guarantee the midterm voting. Once the scrutiny is finished by the whole electoral justice system of the country, there are 24 judges who will be in charge of carrying out the definitive scrutiny 48 hours later. Let's remember that the valid scrutiny is that conducted at the voting table, and the definite scrutiny will be carried out 48 hours after the vote. Since March of last year, the electoral justice system has studied 200 electoral processes around the world and guarantees the safety of the elections in this South American country. And what I'm going to ask you all to do is to find yourselves on the electoral register at padron.gov.ar, because it is necessary that you know with certainty in which polling station you will exercise your right to vote. That additional 20% of stations could have changed the establishment or the school where you were used to go to vote. Voting here is voluntary for those between 16 and 18 years of age. It is compulsory for citizens between 18 and 70 and optional for those over 70.
And the International Day for People of African Descent was celebrated this Tuesday, August 31st, for the first time. Through this day, the United Nations set out to promote the extraordinary contributions of the African diaspora around the world and to work towards eliminating all forms of discrimination against people of African descent. The world today is full of examples of racism, with last year's mobilizations against police brutality and systemic racism in the United States, making global headlines and sparking protests across the world to draw attention to the ongoing discrimination wherever it takes place. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back from the South. August 31st marked 5 years since Brazil's first woman president, Dilma Rousseff, was illegally impeached for a widely practiced budgetary infraction she was later exonerated from. From Sao Paulo, our correspondent Brian Mier reports.
August 31st marks the 5-year anniversary of the illegal removal of Brazil's first democratically elected female president, Dilma Rousseff, from the Workers' Party, through a process that's commonly referred to now as a parliamentary, mediatic, and judicial coup supported by the Brazilian military. The president who replaced her, Michel Temer, has repeatedly said in public that it was a coup as well, and in a speech he gave to the corporate think tank ASCO in New York shortly after the coup, he said that it happened because Rousseff refused to implement a neoliberal deep austerity program called Bridges to the Future. One of the most important things that Rousseff did as president in 2014 was that she allocated 10% of Brazil's GDP for public education using profits from the Petrobras state petroleum company. One of the first things that Michel Temer did after he took office was cancel that law and then push through a constitutional amendment freezing all public health and education spending for 20 years. Rousseff gave an interview to the Persio Abramo Foundation last weekend, and in it she described this coup as an ongoing process. It didn't just end at 2016. She considers the militarization of politics, the militarization of the executive and judicial branches as part of the coup. She considers that phase 2 of the coup was the political election season imprisonment of former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva so that he was unable to run for office. And she considers the Bolsonaro presidency one more phase in this ongoing process, and she warns of the risk of a further clampdown on human rights this September 7th when Bolsonaro's fascist supporters are planning a possible armed occupation of the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Brian, for this report. Brazilian trade unions have called for broad sectors of society to unite and mobilize against the government of far-right President Jair Bolsonaro. As Brazil faces an escalating economic, social, and political crisis, workers' representatives criticize the increasingly authoritarian nature of the Bolsonaro government and warned of the need of unity on the eve of the 199th anniversary of the Proclamation of Independence. Unions have called on broad sectors to come together to address the abuse of power, urgent issues such as the creation of decent jobs, the need for social programs for the most vulnerable sectors, and an adequate plan to tackle the health crisis sparked by COVID-19. And now we address other topics. Madagascar is on the brink of experiencing the world's first climate change famine, according to the United Nations, after 4 years without rain. Tens of thousands of people are already insecurity as the country sees its worst drought in 4 decades, which has devastated isolated farming communities in the south of the country. The UN estimates that 30,000 people are currently experiencing the highest internationally recognized level of food insecurity, level 5, and there are concerns the number affected could rise sharply as Madagascar enters the traditional lean season before harvest. Although Madagascar experiences frequent droughts, it is often affected by the change in weather patterns. Experts believe climate change is directly linked to the current crisis. The National Civil Protection System in El Salvador remains on alert due to the threat of heavy rainfall. Authorities have deployed a series of emergency control and response teams following Monday's sudden downpours, which sparked flooding in the departments of La Libertad and La Paz, the overflowing of streams in the municipality of Jiquilisco, and increased the risk of landslides in the mountains between the departments of Santa Ana and Chalatenango. Experts note that the rainfall is the result of a large area of low pressure and the passage of a tropical wave. And the Parana River, the 10th largest river basin in the world, is suffering its worst low in more than a half a century, with experts pointing to climate change. The second largest river in South America and the most biodiverse and socio-productive wetland in continental Argentina has been shrinking since 2019 and has now reached lows not since 1940. In the last few months, the low water was affected commercial shipping, electricity generation, fishing, the tourist industry, and also the supply of water for consumption and irrigation. Experts know that Brazilian dams, deforestation, and climate change are among the causes of the current crisis.
Of the vast network of secondary watercourses that the main cause feeds, only 10 to 20% of the larger secondary watercourses are currently in operation, carrying very little water, and the rest of the surface area has no water at all.
All the chemicals, the heavy materials such as mercury or lead, are being preserved in everything that is the coast, everything that is the land. So when the times come, when this comes out, those fish that sucks the mud are going to die, and we are going to see, as we have already seen, images of thousands of fish floating because they are dead, precisely because of this material.
We have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Despite the chaotic scenes to the contrary, U.S. President Joe Biden claimed Tuesday that he was ready for every eventuality in the withdrawal of troops from Afghanistan. Speaking one day after the last U.S. troops left Afghanistan, Biden defended his decision to exit the country, describing it as the best decision for America. Biden claimed that the U.S. had achieved its original goal in Afghanistan by hunting down Osama bin Laden, but stressed that the terrorist threat has changed since then, and the U.S. will maintain its fight against it, but without the need to fight a ground war to do it. Something that has been clearly seen already as the U.S. used drones to strike alleged ISIS-K targets, with 10 members of one family dead, including 7 children. They were killed in one such strike on Sunday. Despite the rhetoric, more foreign intervention led by the U.S. can be expected in the ravaged country.
No nation has ever done anything like it in all of history.
As different nations work to establish new relations with those ruling Afghanistan, India's ambassador to Qatar held talks with a top Taliban leader on Tuesday. According to the Indian Foreign Ministry, the meeting was requested by the Taliban. The two sides discussed the safety of Indian nationals who remain on Afghan soil. India invested over $3 billion in Afghanistan during the U.S. occupation and the former government of Ashraf Ghani, including in dams, roads, and trade infrastructure. Afghanistan is vital to India's strategic interests in the region. In the wake of the situation in Afghanistan and global outcry regarding those attempting to flee the country, European Union member states met to once again study their immigration policy. During the roundtable meeting on Tuesday in Brussels, EU Foreign Affairs Chief Joseph Borrell outlined a plan to help Afghanistan's neighboring countries to take in asylum seekers, once again showing the unwillingness of European states who played a role in the 20-year conflict to take in those who suffer its consequences. Instead, there are plans to finance the construction of reception centers for asylum seekers outside the borders of the EU to try to prevent the refugee crisis from reaching Europe. And now we address other topics. Although very limited, tourism activities in certain areas of Cuba continue. In the first 5 months of this year, the island received only 9% of visitors as compared to the same period in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have more details in the following report from the central province of Ciego de Ávila by our correspondent, Lisandra Andres.
35 kilometers of rocky road separate the Morón municipality in Ciego de Ávila from the tourist resort of Cayo Coco, one of the most important in Cuba. Foreign visitors from Russia and Canada arrive here weekly, from their arrival at the Máximo Gómez airport to the welcome, and their hotels, strict security protocols are enforced to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
My friends and I are 30 people who come here often. A few of us come 4 or 5 times a year, so something attracts us. First of all, the staff, all the measures they take to keep the staff safe. The management does an exceptional job to make the employees feel good and safe, and everything is perfect.
The hotel facilities in Cayo Coco are made safe for visitors and sector workers. At the Pullman Hotel, for example, they work at 20% capacity, but without ignoring health measures.
The resort is especially safe given the geographic conditions and the strict protocols the Cuban government has implemented to make sure that the travelers who put their trust in us can leave after enjoying a fabulous vacation free of any contagion.
disfrutando unas vacaciones fabulosas y libre de todo contagio.
Having a PCR result in a very short time guarantees us prompt isolation of any person who may be sick, and therefore allows us to curb the transmission or transmissibility of the disease within our facilities, which means we provide a more wealthy tourism, safer, with more guarantees for the tourist who is arriving in the country.
For almost a year, the Hotel Sol Cayo Coco has been operating as a hospital for the treatment of patients confirmed with COVID-19 and travelers arriving from abroad, a measure that prevents the contact between tourists and residents of Morón municipality.
All the workers we have in the red zone in the monitoring area are equipped with all protective means, both health workers and hotel workers, who have been with us from the first day. And of course they have been trained, and if any personnel who have not worked here before arrive, of course we explain to them the measures to be followed, both by the personnel who are in charge of the hospital and the team leader who's in the red zone.
We are making sure that the tourism system is kept active, because we know how important it is for the country. We are doing our part. We also have people working voluntarily in the hospitals, and that is what we have to do. It is a great task we face now.
The Ciego de Ávila Keys are the fourth largest of the Cuban archipelago. The development of tourism in this region is an important source of hard currency income for the country and of employment for the residents of the province. And in times of the COVID-19 pandemic, nobody here has let their guard down in the implementation of health protocols to avoid infection.
Lisandra Andrés, TeleSUR, Ciego de Ávila, Cuba.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.